Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is Coffee Chats with Coach Candy. Cheers, everyone. Grab your coffee, grab your tea, grab your water, grab whatever it is. I am so excited to have you here on this Tuesday morning for episode 86. I actually am going to dig into Good Morning, Yvette. I came across something this morning on Facebook as I was logging in and getting ready for this morning's call that prompted me to have an interesting conversation today. I have no idea where this is going to go. And good morning, Deborah. And it could get to be really charged, but it was something that I read this morning that kind of triggered a question in my mind. I actually had two different responses to it when I saw it come up. It was just a meme. It was just a picture that one of my clients posted. And it reminded me of a conversation I had with a mentor of mine many, many, many years ago. My mentor, Jack, who was the former president of the Wisconsin Association of School District Administrators. He has three daughters, sort of adopted me as another daughter when he was one of my clients when I was living up in Wisconsin. And I remember that we had a conversation one day we were talking about the current state of just what was going on in the world. And this was probably gosh, that would have been 15 years ago maybe that we had this particular conversation, because it was back when I was with Johnson Controls. So it had to be 15, 20 years ago. Holy cow, I'm dating myself. And what was interesting about it was we got into this conversation about women's roles in society and women versus men, and what talents and skills women bring to the table versus what men bring to the table, and how we're different, how we're the same. And I remember Jack making a comment that he said, "It breaks my heart that women feel they have to become men in order to succeed, and they're losing the very essence of what makes them female." Good morning, Mateo. And so an interesting namaste for sure. And so I always found that to be an interesting thing. And he's like, "Candy, you've made so many sacrifices to be where you're at." And I said, I do good. I'm successful. He's like, "Yes, and at what cost?" We had this really deep, and it was one of the first times that this kind of question dropped in. And here's the meme that I read this morning. And so I really want to open up a discussion. Like I said, I don't know where this is going to go, and this might get me in a little trouble, which is perfectly fine. That's what this space is for us to dig in, right? Exactly, Yvette. So here's the question, and I actually should close my door. I can hear there's a lot of background noise, so my apologies this morning. Except it feels really good to have the door open. So here's the meme that I read off of one of my clients' posts this morning, and it took me back to that conversation with Jack, and it took me back to a space where I was like, because I have a lot of conversations, especially in the circles that I run and with the thought leaders that I am very blessed and honored to be in community with, to have in my tribe. And we talk a lot about masculine, feminine energy. And it was interesting because one of my gurus was talking about how masculine and feminine energy has nothing to do with male, female. And there's certain things that men bring to the table that women bring to the table traditionally. And so here was the meme. And so I want to throw this out there because, like I said, I actually have multiple thoughts around this. And this is just real time this morning as I was like, I actually thought I was going to have something else to talk about this morning, which I'll bring later this week. And it just hit me. And it's the way it does. You get the message you need when you need it, right? And so when the student appears, the teacher is ready. So apparently this is me being ready. So the message was, our generation is becoming so busy trying to prove that women can do what men can do, that women are losing their uniqueness. Women weren't created to do everything a man can do. Women were created to do everything a man cannot do. And so I was like, what do I feel about that? That was one that literally this morning, just a few minutes ago when I read it, and I'll read it again in just a moment, it got me, it had me stop. It literally had me stop, good morning, James, to think about, what does that really mean? What does that mean as we look at everything that's going on? Good morning, Shirley. And so I want to plant the seed. I want to have a conversation this morning because I'm having multiple trains of thought where that goes. Oh, I've seen that meme. Yeah, I've seen it before too, and today it hit me. And there's several out there that say things like that because there are reasons why there's masculine energy and feminine energy. There's men and women. There's reasons why we're different. And I think about a meme like that, and I'm like, where's the validity in that, and where do I want to challenge that? And I think about the aspect of the conversation that I had with Jack and the space of when we talked about, especially from the business environment, where there's more opportunities, and why diversity in general is so important, is because you're bringing in different experiences, different influences, different energy. If you have all the same people around the table, the lack of creativity, intuition, innovation, really being able to dial in and do what we talked about yesterday, which is actively listen to other points of view, you're missing that component. So I absolutely agree with that. I agree that you need to have people represent different genders, different perspectives, different cultures, different races. The more diversity you have, the more you expand out new perspectives, new thinking. So I really believe that. And I know I used to say, even when I was working at Northwestern Mutual, it amazes me how companies talk about diversity sometimes, and they say, oh, we need to recruit different, yet then they try to put them in the same box to make them the same and turn out the same Stepford children across the board. And it was amazing to me how people would recruit women or recruit minorities, and they would bring them in and try to make them exactly the same as everybody else. And so I think about, what is that, again, right? So I'm curious, what shows up for you? Because like I said, I have multiple trains of thought, and I'm being very open and honest right now. I have different ways I could open up this discussion, and I could have a perspective. And I think when I see something that says our generation is becoming so busy trying to prove that women can do what men can do, that women are losing their uniqueness. Women weren't created to do everything a man can do. Women were created to do everything a man can't. And I think about the yin yang in the universal laws. I think about the balance of masculine and feminine energy. And it's interesting because right now I'm going through another certification course, more so because of who I want to play with and the teachers that I want to work with versus getting another certification. And there's an expression around masculine energy versus feminine energy. And the feminine energy, and so if you look at, there's really three components of feminine energy when you look at the flow of it, and you look at, and it's really in the space of expression, surrender, and invitation. So feminine energy is that space of creative expression, and this is not male female, this is masculine and feminine energy. This is the way, and different individuals. There are women that have more masculine energy. There are men that have more feminine energy. And what's interesting is I was going through this training in Vancouver about a month ago, was the fact that we have so many layers of masculine and feminine energy that most of us don't know what our inherent default is. And so it's interesting because I would be the first person to say I have more masculine energy than feminine energy. And what was interesting as we were doing the exercises is actually uncovered that I probably have 75% feminine energy and 25% masculine energy. I've done a stacking of masks over the years to play in the environments that I've played in, to prove myself, because when I default and think about the things that speak to my soul, what shows up for me is the space of love more than the space of needing freedom. And so feminine energy tends to be that space of wanting to create is focused on where and how to create love in the world, where and how to tap into love. Where masculine energy, its first inclination is the sense of freedom, the sense of creating this peace, this openness, this freedom. And so it's sort of that default space. And it was interesting because even my master trainer at the time that was going through this training with us, he said, look at your default. He goes, think about the movies that you watch. Think about when you're in that just kind of relaxed space and you just want something that fills your soul. He goes, what's your inclination? Do you tend to go more towards the romantic comedies, the love stories, the dramas that have a really deep, profound message, the feel-good movies? Or do you tend to want the action movie, the movie that's about claiming something, which is a very masculine energy? And it has nothing to do with male or female. It has to do with what your natural energy is. And most people don't know, myself included. It was such an eye-opener for me when we went through these exercises to see how much feminine energy I actually have when my whole life has been more in a masculine energy space based on either survival, based on how I perceived how I had to succeed, played in an engineering dominated field, played in Fortune 100 and 500 companies where it's very male dominated energy, masculine energy. And when you look at the difference between them, there's a very different difference in the energy between masculine energy and feminine energy. And so before I get into that more, I want to see what you guys are posting. I don't believe my existence should depend on how I compare to a man. I absolutely agree with that. And I think, and I wonder sometimes, because I agree with that wholeheartedly. Good morning, Robin. And I wonder if on a subconscious level, we have been conditioned to behave in a way that is out of alignment with that. Because I truly don't think, and I think about the majority of my life where I spent my time trying to prove something, right? I was trying to prove I was just as good. And I remember even running around as a kid, anything boys can do, I can do better, right? I think I even had a t-shirt when I was a kid. And I was on a warpath, truthfully, to prove that I could do anything a man could do. And I worked really hard in many environments. And I remember having opportunities where no matter how much I could play in that space, having the recognition that I still wasn't going to be a man. And sometimes having that space of, am I okay with that? Because I think there's this conditioning and programming. Like I said, I can go all different directions on this. And I'm just opening up this conversation because it really dropped in this morning and hit me. And so let's see, an interesting component is the cultural aspect. Feminine and masculine can take on slightly different meanings in other countries. Absolutely. Mateo, as a very young leader in my teens, late 80s, I was managing adults and teens to build sets and operate a community theater. I was also a tech sergeant in CAP, Civil Air Patrol, where my platoon of boys and girls were trained to provide security, do search and rescue, fight fires, fly planes. The only difference, apart from the ability to have children, were similar to any normal differences in stamina, physical capabilities, height, and weight. Not all men can do what other men can do, same for women. When I would be asked to do something manly by a female, I would challenge them to find a way to do it themselves. When a male would complain about doing girl stuff, I would teach them the value of why they need to do it. Agree with that. This continued into being the youngest director in the history of the oldest ad agency on earth. At 24, I had a small army of men and women, straight and LGBTQ, where all those lessons and challenges from my teens applied to equally make it individual. Training them to uncouple from gender was the hardest thing, focusing on the goals of what someone can do versus the differences. Wow, I love that. Good morning, Robin. Good morning, Preston. I love that, and I love that space. And so, yes, I think there's value in teaching gender roles. And here's the thing, I don't think that everything that we think a woman should do, the traditional ways that we talk about gender, I think in what Mateo's talking about, releasing that, right? And I think it's more about looking at masculine versus feminine energy versus male versus female. Because I do think there's people that are wired differently with the gifts that they bring. And so when I talk about feminine energy, I'm talking about the space of creativity or expression, the space of surrender, and the space of imitation. And so what's interesting is that I believe there's a dance for all of us. And this is some of the work and the training that I'm doing right now is, where is that intersection of that dance? Because on the masculine side, masculine energy is more about presence, it's more about claim, and it's more about penetration. And I don't mean that just from a sexual standpoint. I mean that from a way to penetrate an environment or an area. And when you look at dominant masculine energy and dominant feminine energy, you can see that dance or that wave between that space of expression and surrender and invitation. And then the other side of that, which is all about presence and claim and penetration. And when you look at, there's a space and I think to what Mateo's saying there, when we lose that space of women should do this and men should do that, and that stereotype, and teach them to have skills, and then look at what's the right dance. And so maybe this is where this opportunity is going. And again, I'm just talking this through as it showed up this morning, because this really dropped in for me, where I was kind of like, what do I feel about that? How do I think about that kind of message? And what is it conveying to our youth? What is it conveying in our society? And do I believe it? Because I'm not sure I believe it. I'm also I'm not sure I dispel it either. I think there's something underneath it that's more than just what those words say. And so again, if we go back to yesterday and we think about listening versus hearing, because listening is an active space, hearing is a passive space. And I could just look at those words and have a reaction and be like, okay. Or I can delve in deeper and say, what's the meaning underneath that I choose to take that feels as if it warrants having this conversation? And so I think about that space of skills in their entirety I don't think are either male or female. I think that's where we've gotten caught up in this space of men should be doing this and women should be doing that, versus the dance for each individual in that space, because every person has a balance, has some sort of ratio of masculine and feminine energy. There's no one that has just all masculine energy. There's some people that are overcorrecting in that space and maybe like in that space and abusing that as a power stance or something else. And the same thing with the feminine energy, where they might be in more of a passive, more of a, so there are ways that we've overcorrected or ways that we've engaged. But if you look at the core essence of who we are as beings, there's this ratio or this balance within each of us. And I think the opportunity is for us to find our own personal dance, right? And so what does that mean? Are we, because if you look at the stacking of mass, and this was one of the most revolutionary things that happened to me in my training in Vancouver, was understanding the levels of mass that I have put on. I think about where I had to create a more dominant masculine space for myself. Again, not male, female, but masculine energy to actually create a space of protection and survival for me and my family growing up, because there were things that somebody had to step up for to my dad, and somebody had to be the person that said, okay, enough's enough, and I'll antagonize this. I'll show up with presence. I will be the person that takes the hits so that I can protect the people around me. And so that was one of the first layers of mass that I put on. And then, you know, you get into high school and you see the fact that, wait, no one's paying attention to me because I have too strong of an energy. Now I've got to play in this feminine. And we keep putting on these layers that are not true to who we are. And so I think it's more of a peeling back and getting into what is the right balance for me. And so again, I'm going to see what you guys are posting here, because my brain is just, yes. And Mateo, I think that's the premise, right? It's masculine versus feminine, not man versus woman. I think there's such a powerful difference in that. Masculine energy does not pick a gender. Feminine energy doesn't pick a gender. We have both, and it's the balance or the dance in between, right? Robin, I'm 15 years or more older than most of you, and I was in a total male-dominated world, but my feminine side, not sexual, but feminine male, worked to my advantage. But understanding that made a huge difference in how I handled opportunities. It is a dance. Wow, I love that, Robin. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, think about it. We have such different perspectives based on generation, right? If you're a baby boomer, if you're a Gen Xer, if you're a Gen Y, a millennial, whatever the other categories are that are out there, there's a different perspective or filter that you're bringing to the table in this conversation as well, based on what you've observed, based on what you've experienced, based on what you've heard and seen in your lifetime, right? And so I love, Robin, that you're sharing a perspective where yes, you come from, you know, perhaps a very different way and an even stronger masculine presence in the entire kind of environment you played in, especially in some traditional roles and things that were, you know, buckets where genders were supposed to do one thing or the other, and being able to recognize and own that dance in that space. I think that's such a, I'm loving having this conversation. Like I said, I had no idea where this was going to go. And I wanted to open up the space because I think it's so needed to have a conversation about, is it really male versus female, or is it about this dance between masculine and feminine energy? And I think, like, I look at my brother, who was a very tender soul as a child, and my dad tormented him because he wasn't man enough, right? And I think about the softness and the compassion, and I think about how over the years my brother has created different levels, and sometimes it's created a source of frustration for him because there's a not knowing who you are. We've lost sight of the essence of who we are because we get into these gender roles, or we get into these rules and boxes of you need to be this or you need to be that, and how dare you think that you could be. And God forbid a woman has a stronger presence, has that masculine energy, knows how to use that in the dance. And don't even get me started on what people think if a man is more expressive or has more of that invitation space. There's this whole like judgment that starts to spin in that space, when if we were to take ownership and start to understand, and because one of the things that's actually a trigger for me is when I hear the language out there, because there's so much of this, women need to be women, men need to be men, this is what it looks like. And when people talk about the goddess warrior energy, I actually really struggle with that. Because I've read some of the work, I've actually dug in quite a bit because I want to understand. I want to understand what people teach. And what I don't like is it feels as if women are being told to play a game, to be different, versus dropping into whatever their natural energy is. And I think the same is happening for men when it talks about you need to, even when it's bringing in some of that feminine energy, for a man that says, well, then it needs to look like this. It needs to be done this way. It needs to have these rules. And I think that's so damaging and limiting. I think we are getting into a space where and I personally feel we've regressed in some of the male-female conversation. I think we've regressed in the diversity conversation, the conversation about race and culture and stereotypes. I think that's part of what we're seeing right now, is that people are further polarizing instead of opening up a dialogue to talk about the dance in that space. And so I love that you guys are weighing in on this. This is, like I said, I've seen it before, and it just dropped in this morning where I was just like, man, I feel like it's an opportunity for us to dig in and have a conversation. That society changes, generations change. My mom would have been 82 this year. When she was coming up, there weren't a lot of options. If she were 20 something now, she'd be in engineering school. Yeah, isn't that interesting? I think about my mom says the same thing. My mom's 71, or will be, wait, how old am I? Yeah, she'll be 71 this year. And I think about, when she talks about what was acceptable and what wasn't, and what she was told and what she could do. And I think about, there was this fire and spirit in my mother that probably got quelched at some point, because she wasn't, I mean, I even think about things like my mother's left-handed naturally, and she was conditioned and told that she had to do things right-handed because it was absolutely, not okay, not valid for her to be left-handed. So she cuts right-handed, she does other things. And I'm like, that's crazy to me, because my sister and I are both left-handed as well, which was a side story. My brother grew up thinking all women were left-handed and all men were right-handed, because it was just a strange anomaly in my family. But I think about even things like that. We condition people from their natural state. And so I wonder oftentimes, and I truly do believe this, I think we start out in this world as geniuses. I think as children, we know exactly who we are. I think we are really tiled into whether we have more masculine energy or feminine energy, and we know that dance in between. If you ever watch a child, they know how to create that space of expression and surrender and invitation, along with the dance of presence and claim and penetration. They naturally do that. And then over time, we dumb them down. We dumb them down by all of the rules and cultural norms and beliefs and programming in our society. And then as we start to age and get into our twilight years, we start reflecting back going, oh my God, if I only would have, if I would have stopped listening to everyone. And I think as we talk about all the noise, and we talk about standing in your own voice, and we talk about getting in the arena. I think getting in the arena is being able to peel back all those masks, peel back all those layers of feminine, masculine, feminine, masculine, feminine, masculine, or masculine and feminine, masculine and feminine energy that we've done over the years. Because even if your balance is where it needs to be right now, there's probably layers upon layers upon layers to get to the actual core essence of who you are, based on all of the things that we've experienced and been conditioned through the various programming beliefs that have been handed down to us. And what's interesting is you think about when even people come together in relationships, it's like their mask connects with someone else's mask. And it's why sometimes when someone's growing in a relationship and someone's not, there becomes this incredible gap or divide between the two, because you're peeling back the layers and getting back to the core essence of you, who you are, and this other person is still masked up, for lack of a better word, and there's this separation that begins. And so I think the opportunity, or the question is, how do we peel back some of those layers of the masks? How do we get into a space to start to tap into what our natural balance is between masculine and feminine energy? And I don't think it's necessarily that we're getting lost I think a lot of people are getting lost in this proving one space or the other in gender roles. I do think that there's a real issue there for a lot of people. And I think the bigger issue, or the bigger opportunity, is understanding your own rhythm between the masculine and the feminine energy, and finding your dance. I will say right now, that's a lot of work that I'm doing. I've had several of you reach out and say, Candy, I don't know, something's been changing in your messaging. Because I'm allowing myself to go to a space that's a different space for me. I'm allowing myself to be more vulnerable. I'm allowing myself to be more dialed into my own feminine energy, because it's something that hasn't necessarily been natural for me. I have overcompensated so much because I've played in such male-dominated fields, because I had such a need for survival. I've been in fight mode for a good portion of my life, that even a friend of mine who's does functional medicine said to me, I wonder if you're getting a coding in your body that it just is like, where's the next fight coming? Because I have so programmed myself to be on the defense, to be in a space to create that presence, to be able to claim what I need to go after it. And it's exhausting me. And even as I've done, and we're going to talk a little bit, I'm actually going to meet with someone Wednesday to talk about human design in our own natural way we receive information. Me pushing isn't my natural energy. And when I realize that and allow myself to receive with ease and grace, which is so foreign to what I've learned, not to who I am naturally, but to what I've learned, I'm now trying to drop in and allow myself to get back to that pure essence of who I am, instead of what I've done the majority of my life for 46 years, which is push and at times pull, but usually push and muscle, which is a lot of masculine energy, which is energy that I didn't need to be using. But it's what I was either taught or what I learned or what I taught myself based on circumstances and experiences that required me, or in my mind required me, to show up a certain way. And so I want you to think about that, right? Yvette, thinking about that meme, I think that the changes in our, there we go. I think the changes in our society are a reflection of people deciding to throw off chains and constraints that others have put on them. Yeah, I think there's a lot of that, right? And I think some people are doing that successfully, and other people are doing that with intentions to be more from I'm going to prove this, or I'm going to do that, and I'm doing it for shock and awe, versus dropping in and doing it for tapping into the space of who you really are. There's a difference when you're doing it from a place to validate and you're needing that external response, versus doing it because it's a space that feels true and pure to how you choose to show up, your own internal compass, your integrity. And I think that's part of where that meme starts to apply. I think there's too many people that are out there doing it for external validation or external observation or external something to warrant see, here I am. And it's coming from more of an ego-driven space versus this is who I am and I don't care what the rest of the world thinks. I am starting to dial into who I am, and I know that, and I'm going to show up powerfully in that space. And if it rocks the boat, so be it. I'm not here to play safe. I'm not here to make everybody feel comfortable. And there's a big difference in that space. And so I think the question when you look at a meme like that is, which space are people playing in? And I would defer that probably 80% of people are doing it not from the purest of intentions. They're doing it because they wanna get into the game. They wanna prove something, versus I know who I am and I'm going into the arena. And so thinking about that, right? Mateo, remember, we are supercomputers. We can only function based on core operating systems and inputs, right? Our inputs, media, have regressed to basal primal fear because it sells the most ads and people focus on negativity. Oh, I was just having this conversation with my mom last night. Due to confirmation bias. Every decade our software needs to be updated. Our ability to perceive, revise, thereby changing our core software. Like it or not, humanity, like computers and software, upgrade over time if we allow it. It is not fast in our own life, but psychologists and behavioral economics are showing tolerance increases wealth, individualism, objectivity led to progress. The smaller the bucket, the slower the growth. This is a critical way to say the traditional is constantly being shattered. It is uncomfortable. It is uneasy. It makes people say, make it great again when it was not as great as it will be next 10 years. Candy, I'm not here to play it safe. Yeah, exactly. And it was interesting because my mom and I were having a conversation. We were talking about, last night, we were talking about some of the things going on, and she made a comment. She said, that's just because the world's so bad right now. There's just so many. I was making a comment about some neighbors, and she said, that's because anymore, everything's just falling. And I said, I choose not to believe that. I said, just because our media is highlighting and wanting to emphasize all of the hate and the stuff that's bad. And don't get me wrong, I don't for a moment think that we don't have a serious issue going on, that we need to take action, and conversations like these are part of it. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely feel as if things are shifting and weird, but I also know that there's a lot of people that are good. And I know that there's a lot of healing and there's a lot of work that's being done. And what's happening is because it's not glamorous, it's not reality television, it's not whatever, we're not focused on that. And so right now that we're shifting the pendulum, that everybody's feeling all of the heaviness, all of the negativity, because that's all we're choosing to focus on. It's all our media is putting out there. It's all we're being programmed. When I would defer that there's far more good going on in this world than all of the pain and all of the hurt. We've sensationalized, which is part of why it keeps happening. We're sensationalizing all of the hate, all of the hurt, all of the pain, all of the ugly. And so people are stepping in going, I want my 15 minutes in this space that's being sensationalized and revered and talked about, versus shifting our attention to all of the good that's happening in the world. And my mom and I were talking about last night. She's like, I guess I didn't think about it that way. And I said, I choose to believe that there's more good in this world than there is bad. I personally, and people can call me Pollyanna Sunshine, they can call me whatever they want. I choose to believe that love will win out. I choose to believe we're hitting a space where a massive healing is about to take place. I choose to believe that we're having these conversations and you're all here because you believe that too. I choose to believe that regardless of whether we're a supercomputer or not, and I have my own beliefs about dialing into that, I do believe we get reset and programming and things that are there. And I also believe that we're a spiritual being more than a human computer, and that to be in this space, to lean in and trust, I believe there's far more opportunity and far more good in that space than all of what's being sensationalized around us. And that is a choice, and that is something that no one will convince me of otherwise. And if that means I stand in a space by myself, so be it. Because I think there's an opportunity, and right now we've gotten caught up in this bubble of fault and blame and polarization and judgment and these roles and biases, when I think it's an opportunity to say, who am I? Everything about this is to drop into a space to say, at the end of the day, who am I? And the only person I have to be accountable to is me and my maker, whatever that might be or whatever I believe. And anybody else that's not comfortable with that, so be it. It's not my responsibility. It's not my responsibility to make other people comfortable. In fact, if anything, it's my responsibility to shift them out of that comfortable space, because that's the calling that keeps dropping in for me. That's the message that's very clear, that to start and have these kind of conversations, which can be very triggering. And for people that don't want to engage in a way, they can come and attack this conversation and say, well, this is the problem. I don't think this is the problem at all. I think this is part of the solution. And so I'm not going to stand back and be quiet when I don't even know if I'm really clear about what I think in that space, isn't going to stop me from opening up the conversation to hear the perspectives, to say, wow, I never thought about it that way. Because listening, real listening from your heart, is an active space that says, and I love when Brene Brown says this, look, courage isn't about knowing the answer. Courage is about showing up regardless. It's about showing up and not knowing what the outcome is going to be. Showing up and not knowing how emotionally charged people are going to get. It's showing up and asking the question, and then listening with an open heart, listening from a place of vulnerability, listening in this way that says, I can see where you're coming from. And I'm still working through, what do I believe? Because there's been so many layers of other people telling me what I'm supposed to believe in this space. I'm not sure I know when it comes to something like, what do I really believe? And so again, this is why I wanted to have this conversation this morning, and I'm getting fired up right now. But if people want to prove something, that's fine. They can knock themselves out, right? Absolutely. I totally agree with that, Yvette, because here's the thing. If that's what they need to do, or if that's their journey, then namaste to them. And I honor their journey, and I also disengage and untether myself from it. Those are not the people that I want to surround myself in a tribe. I don't want to be around the people that feel that they have a need to prove something. That energy is exhausting to me. That energy is not something that feeds my soul. It shuts me down. And so, yes, I can love them. I can respect them. I can honor their journey, and I can untether myself and walk away, because I am no longer I no longer have any desire in any aspect to prove anything in my life. I have spent the majority of my life, a good 40 years of my life, trying to prove things to people. And you know what? It's exhausting, it's tiring, and I'm over it. And so everything in my life moving forward is to say, look, here's who I am. Take it or leave it, love it or not. Either way, neither one of them's none of my business. And I've got work to do. So if you want to go on your merry way and this is the space that you need to be in, more power to you. I love you. You can stay in Camp Content. Camp Candy has a mission and a charge and a movement that we are creating. And for those that want to get on board, here we go. And that is so dropped in as a core belief for me as I've peeled back some of those layers. I agree with you, Yvette. I would not want to live in any other time. I think there's such an incredible opportunity before us right now. I think there's a movement of healing. I think there's a shift. I know there's people like, oh, the world's going to come to an end by 2050. Great. You can believe that. Or you can believe something new is going to be birthed. Something new is going to be tapped into. And if you've ever looked at history, we've had these kind of moments, maybe not as sensationalized as this because we didn't have the media that covered all of it, but we've had these moments in history. This is not the first time something like this has happened. And every time there's been a movement, there's been a shift, there's been something that has lifted us to the next level. And I feel like, man, what an awesome space to be when you're in that place where it feels like it could be rock bottom, because then you get to be part of the tide, part of the space, part of the energy that lifts that up, part of the vibration that creates the next wave of whatever humanity is going to look like, what it's going to feel like. And I personally, yes, I might be crazy in this, and that's okay. I said before, my eulogy will read, I am batshit crazy. I am badass, batshit crazy, and I change the world. Awesome. Perfect. Works for me. Because I don't care. It takes being batshit crazy to step into a place when everybody wants to give up, when everybody says, this is it, this is doomsday, whatever, and they're throwing in the towel, and there's so much that they're buying into. I say bullshit. I call bullshit on all of it, and I'm like, this is the time to get excited, because this is the time where we collectively can create something that's never happened. And I agree with you that I would not want to live in any other time. I think it's amazing to be here, to be able to have this conversation. I think about Robin saying 15 years ago, I think about what was different, you know, with my mom's generation and the conversations they weren't allowed to have. And now, because we have so much information, we have so much, we can have conversations that never were happening 20, 30, 100 years ago. Man, think about that. We're in a place that's never been before. And how can you not be excited about being right here, right now, and witnessing both the stuff that's not good and all of the love and compassion and things that are surrounding that are good? Because there's two sides of that equation always, right? Agreed. Oh, thank you. Then we are the Pollyanna Sunshine Twin Girls. Oh, I love that. Yes, that was one of my nicknames. People used to say that to me growing up, as if it were a bad thing. They'd tell me, you're so Pollyanna Sunshine. And I'd be like, somebody's got to, because I love that movie, and I love that she would play the glad game. No matter what went wrong, she would play the glad game. What can you be glad about? What can you have joy about, right? Mateo, I snuck into a country I did not have permission to be in, a country we are told hate Americans. I was invited into a home, had dinner, cleaned their dishes, and high-fived them all with zero common words understood. Just saying. Yeah, you know what? Our barriers, our walls, all this stuff is nonsense. And so thank you, Robin, so much. Have a wonderful, beautiful day yourself, my friend. Yvette, you are so right about sensationalism. I truly believe there is more good in the world, but it doesn't sell papers or get viewers. No, there's so much good in the world. There's so much love and compassion. I see it every day in Austin. People are generous and loving and so helpful. And I mean, I can remember having something wrong with my car when I was driving from Austin and San Antonio, and piece of it was my old car, piece of that frame that was coming loose, and some guy and his girlfriend stopped, and he gets under there and he just starts, and I go, I can't, how can I pay you back? And she's like, honey, this is what we do. We're Texans, right? I love, there's so much love in the world. I love the way people come together in moments of crisis and pain and hurt. And yet we don't spend enough time talking about that and thinking about that. And there's far more good in this world than there is hate and evil. And I just, no one is going to convince me otherwise. And so that I will hold that. I will be in Pollyanna sunshine as long as I possibly can be. Mateo, consider this candy Pam. 50 years ago, only the academic had conversation like this. 100 years ago, only the supremely wealthy were allowed to be academics. Could have these conversations. 300 years ago, these conversations would have killed you. I mean, think about that, right? Yeah, Camp Candy, don't play it safe, baby. Not at all. We're not playing it safe. Here's the time for us to shine a light. And I think about the Care Bear stare. This is the time, if ever. Put your little Care Bear stare on. Know what your emblem's going to be. Stand in the space of the balance for you, that dance of whatever feminine and masculine energy looks like. And don't give a rat's ass what anybody else thinks. If I spent all my time worried about what people thought, I want to be on Facebook Live every morning, let me tell you, because there are people that really, and trust me, the more my voice gets stronger, the more there's people that do not like what I have to say. So be it. Great that I'm doing something right. I absolutely believe the more haters I have, the more my message is something that is resonating for the right people. And so make no apologies. Man, I love that. I had no idea. Like I said, I didn't know where the conversation was going to go. I just knew I wanted to go there today. I have no idea what we're going to talk about tomorrow, y'all. Lately, I've been letting it drop in like 5 minutes before I get on, whether it's something I see, something that I'm reading, or something that I'm just feeling into. So I love that there's not an agenda. I love that we can just come and have conversations. Have a beautiful day, Yvette. Have a beautiful day, all of you. Thank you for your contributions to a powerful conversation. I think we might lean into this even more. But just know I love you all. Thank you for being part of Camp Candy and joining me on Facebook Lives. And go out and dance your dance, and dance like nobody's watching, and dance like you don't care, and dance just because you can. And so with that, everybody, I will see you tomorrow. Mwah! I love you. And thank you, everyone. Make it a great day and dance till you can't dance anymore. I'll talk to you later.